Here's for Bairns, just for 2 or 3 minutes there. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee, Thursday the 11th of July. Paul, have any apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Drumrae, Councillor Geddes, Councillor Hislop and Councillor Tate.
Could I also add Councillor Yen's apologies to that? Thank you.
Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Gilroy.
Yes, there's a number in from DG Design, numbers 10, 11, I think also possibly, just looking at them. Yes, 10 and 11. And just that, as Chairman of DG First, DG Design is sort of to do with it, but I don't think it would make any difference to me sitting in on the applications. Thank you.
I will have to declare an interest in item 4, or not an interest, but I was not at the last meeting when this was discussed, so I will not participate and I will leave the room. Yes, gentlemen.
Same. So the Councillor Dempster and Councillor Ogilvie will leave the room because neither of us were present at the original consideration.
Thank you. Okay. Clerk, could you outline the procedures, please?
The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or an area planning manager or other appointed officer will make a short statement addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. For those applications which are in accordance with the Council policy subject to public speaking, then the order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, applicants or their agents. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak in respect of the application to come forward, sit in the reserved seat and make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of committee members. When each presentation is completed, people should immediately return to their seats. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application, or if the application is a major development significantly contrary to the development plan or a national development, agree a recommendation to be made to full council, who will then determine the application. The decision notice will be issued after a period of 48 hours has passed. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered in the period specified in Council policy. These individuals have all had their registration to speak confirmed and no other persons will be allowed to speak. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order. A copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Representations on planning applications must be made on the basis of valid planning matters only. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and to address the determining issues. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. This should allow sufficient time for interested parties to make relevant points. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Next item is item 4, and I will leave and I'll hand over to Dennis.
Okay, members, item 4 was continued for further information. It is the repainting of exterior of building, listed building consent at 23 Bank Street, 98 Irish Street, Dumfries. Case officer Andrew Robinson, have you anything to add? And could we receive the photos, please? No? Okay, sorry. Is that something we could actually go back to them when all members are present? Although I suppose the members that are missing were actually missing as well for that minute, is that correct? Okay, then the minutes are here for approval. Are we approving them, or are there issues?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. Minutes approved. Then back to item 4. As I say, Andrew, have you anything to add, and could you re-show us the photographs?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick recap on the application. We've just added a couple of more photographs to the slides from the previous committee. Just a quick recap. This is the location of the property on Irish Street, which is in the centre of the map there. This is a close-up of a map of the property which shows the elevation in question, which has been repainted. And there's some photographs of the property which has been painted in the green colour, which has been highlighted in the report. This is a close-up of the building, and this is a few photographs taken from other angles. So this shows the adjoining building, which is part of the premises, but it's listed separately. This is a photograph shown in an opposite direction, showing the context within Irish Street. This is a photograph of the surrounding area, so this is a photograph of Bank Street. As highlighted in paragraph 3.4 of the updated report, we've just added a couple more photographs to show the previous appearance of the building, which is what members were seeking some clarification on. So this is, there's 3 photographs taken by the council in 1995, which was part of an enforcement moratorium at the time, and there's 3 photographs on the record, so this is one of them. This is taken from a slightly different angle, and this is shown face on the building. There's no record in between that date and this date, apart from this image that we could find on Google Maps, which shows the property in the centre of the picture there, shown in April 2009. So that's just some reference, which is cross-referenced in the report, and that's really all I've got to say, Chair.
Okay, members, we're in session. Any comments? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a question on the nature of the current paint. Obviously, we're looking at it today because we're to find out more information on the past and present paint. So it was just to get clarification on whether or not the present paint is in fact impervious or not.
Yes, Councillor, it's a modern gloss paint which has been highlighted within the report that it is an impervious paint that's for the reasons of water entrapment, which has been clarified by the conservation officer in section 2 of the report.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Witts.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I find myself in a bit of a dilemma over this one. We asked for further clarification and deferred it from the last meeting, and I look at the information in front of me here and I'm still a wee bit confused. The consultation section 2, the subparagraphs A, B, C and D give us information which actually is general information and not specific to this building. I mean, it tells us that generally gloss coverings are detrimental to sandstone, traditional sandstone properties. Well, we knew that last time anyway. Section 5 says the question of underlying coatings can only be resolved by samples being taken and analysed by a stone conservator. Have we done that, is my question. And I note, furthermore, the comments on the photographs previously taken, and it asserts that they are non-gloss. Basically, we're saying, well, it looks like non-gloss, but how do we know that it's non-gloss, the previous coatings? I don't know from these photographs, but I'm not an expert. Perhaps I could get clarification on that. I'm not too worried about the streetscape, and I'm not saying that because I'm going to Tobermory next week, and all the buildings in that street, as from the programme Balamory, they're all covered in different colours. And anyway, when you look at Irish Street, you've got that monstrosity of a building, only 2-3 up, a ghastly construction from the 1960s, which obviously went through easily. So, but of course, I think the main concern is this coating damaging to the fabric of the building, and have we actually taken a sample as suggested in 2F? That's my main question.
Short answer to that one is no, we haven't taken samples, nor are we experts to be able to go and take samples, nor have we got the funds to go and get that level of details provided. What is quite clear from the photos that we do have, that Andrew's just shown you, that is not a gloss finish that was there before. So we are quite satisfied as best we can be, because we've got no other evidence from that era, that certainly up to April 2009 it was a non-gloss finish. We now have a non-masonry paint gloss on the top. What is the damage to that building? Well, potentially nothing immediate, but it's the long-term damage to the listed building. That's what the generalised comments the conservation officer are supposed to address. Beyond that, I don't know if Andrew wants to add anything to that, but
just taking on your point on street scene, this is an application for listed building consent, so as a council we can only assess under listed building policy, which is specific to that, of how this proposal affects this listed building only. Street scene would be able to be assessed under an application for planning permission, where we can actually assess more issues, but this particular application, which is for listed building consent, is we can only assess the impact on this building, and we can't take into consideration at this stage the impact in the surrounding area. That could be reasonably done under an application for planning permission, however.
Right, I think I have Councillor McKee, Councillor McComb, Councillor Ted, no, Councillor McComb, Councillor Ted Thompson, and then Councillor Ian Blake, and then Councillor Maitland.
Thank you, Chair. This building was first listed in March 1981. We know at that time it was a painted building. Is it conceivable that when it was first listed, it was gloss paint which was actually on the building?
the listing does not give any details other than the fact it was painted. We can only go on the evidence that we have, which are the 3 photos Andrew has given you already.
Yes, I understand the photos are from 1995, not 1981.
Indeed, but I think if somebody had painted it in gloss before the photos taken in 1995, that would be evident, because of to actually remove gloss paint is going to take quite some effort, and that would leave a residual element that I think would be kind of difficult to cover up with a straightforward masonry paint immediately. So I doubt it is the short answer to it. I can't be absolutely definitive on that, I'm afraid, just because we don't have any more evidence than what we have in the listing and the photos.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. As I see it, the matter before us is actually quite clear. We're dealing with a retrospective application here, and the officers have correctly identified that the work that was carried out was unauthorised, and if it was allowed to remain, would almost certainly have a detrimental effect on that stonework. In addition to that, the work actually fails to respect the character of the locality and settings. I have no hesitation in commending the officers on their report and moving that we accept the recommendations in this report and refuse the application and endorse any enforcement action that might be taken.
Okay, I take it you're making that as a motion. I'll keep going and then we'll sweep that at the end. Councillor Blake, please.
Yeah, just like a little clarity. I think we've heard that the paint that's on the building just now is an impervious paint, and yet there's some mention at the previous meeting that we had that the paint was actually breathable. What's the difference between breathable and impervious?
It's getting into very detailed sort of conservation sort of guidance that, and the way that we've assessed this application is this proposal acceptable that's been put in front of us, and it's considered that it's not. But if the paint was allowed to breathe and it's effectively allowing water that would be sort of coming out of the stonework to actually naturally, I suppose in some ways, to allow the building to breathe so that it can allow any water to come out so it's not getting trapped into the stonework. I think that's as best as I can explain that, really.
If we could come back on that, but I understand at the first meeting it was actually reported by the applicant that the paint was breathable.
The applicant made mention that it was an eco paint, but that's all the information that we were given. There was nothing really substantial in the application that came forward other than a painted sample. There was no details forwarded to the planning authority of exactly what that paint was and what its eco measures were. So that information wasn't actually before us. It was brought up at the committee, but not in front of us as an application to consider.
Councillor Maitland.
I think Councillor Thompson actually was very eloquent in his opinions about what we should be doing here. I think we've got to deal with what's in front of us. We have policies to do with conserving buildings. My understanding is that if you have a paint that is impermeable, that is not going to allow a building to breathe, moisture then gets into the stone, it affects the matrix which binds together the grains of sandstone, and in essence it causes a breakdown of that stone eventually. Now, eventually that's going to have an effect upon that building. And we've got to look at that building in the context of a conservation and listed buildings. We would be doing, I think, Dumfries a gross disservice, not to say actually also suggesting to the public that we are ignoring the policies that they have helped us put together. We've got to look at this and to be fair. And I have no hesitation actually in supporting Councillor Thompson.
Okay, anyone otherwise minded or anybody not spoken yet wishing to speak? Councillor Witt.
Thank you. I'm still unhappy about 2F. I think we've been presented a hostage to fortune by saying this. The question of underlying coatings can only be resolved by samples being taken. I'm minded to move an amendment to say, if I can get any support, to say that, we'll defer this again until we get the material sampled. They go and get samples taken and analysed by a stone conservator. I make that an amendment.
Well, I think we're now being asked to defer this. Is there anybody going to second that? Anyone's minded to second that? I think that becomes the first part of business now. No? No, then you don't have a seconder, so we'll carry on. Councillor McCautry.
Well, that's fine. I was going to make the point, but what's the point in deferring it for a test? Because even if you take a test, what does that prove? If it was originally glass underneath, it shouldn't have been glass, it would have been refused in any case it would have been applied for at that stage. So you're only prolonging the pain for the applicant by deferring it, quite frankly.
Right. With that, I have a motion to accept the recommendation. Is anyone otherwise minded? Councillor Witt.
Can I have my dissent recorded, please?
Certainly. Okay. Paula.
The committee has determined to refuse permission for the reasons as set out in the officer's report and to note the endorsement of enforcement action against the paint.
Thank you. Could we have the chairman and the other members back, please?
Thank you. We now move on to item 5, erection of a wind turbine, 45 metres high to blade tip, and installation of underground cabling at Standingstone Farm, Borgue. Judith Turnbull, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, the images, I want to point out a small correction in the report. It's just on paragraph 1.2, on the third line down, where it says 80 metres for the application site south of the A75, it should be 800. The application site is located near Standingstone Farm at Borgue. This is the location plan. The position of the turbine would be above the farm to the northeast, about 200 metres. And the solid black line is the underground cabling route. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see the road, that's the A755, which is the road from the A75 at Gatehouse Bypass along to Kirkcudbright. And the A75 just runs along the top of the location plan. It's not really in that map. I would also like to point out Conkerton House, which is up. Can't seem to get up at the top, left-hand side. Just to let you know that there's actually a turbine erected there at the moment. It's halfway up the track, maybe 2/3 of the way up the track there towards the house. I've got images of it later. This is just a closer-in view. It shows you the land owned under the control of the applicant, which is outlined in blue round about the farm. And the closest property out with the ownership of the applicant is the one to the north-west. This is just showing the proportions of the turbine: 45 metres to tip, 30 metres to hub, and a 30-metre rotor diameter. This is the ZTV zone of theoretical visibility out to 15 kilometres. The visibility in short to medium views is generally to north and south direction to about 7 kilometres. There's immediate visibility to the west, about 2 kilometres, and 4 kilometres to the east. There's also quite a big swathe of visibility extending further along to the east. You can also see that there's visibility from roads and footpaths, coastal roads and footpaths round about Kirkcudbright Bay, which also extends along the coast to the west. This is a cumulative plan showing the turbines that have been approved, refused, and are still in the system. I hope you're close enough to see, but get this working. Yeah. That one there is the one in question. This one here is the one at Conkerton House. And there should be one more, which I can't quite see along here. There. I'll come on to that. It's at Borgue, and it's within 2 kilometres anyway. But given the other turbines in the area, it's not considered that there are unacceptable cumulative impacts with the proposed turbine. The one at Conkerton House is quite close, but we don't consider it merits a reason for refusal. I've just got a few images. This is looking over the site. I reckon the site's about in the location of the animal feeder there. It's looking up towards the top of the hill. This is taken from the site looking down over Standingstone Farm, and you can see the coast and across the bay. I don't think you stand much of a chance of seeing the existing turbine at Conkerton there, but it is across the valley, and that's Conkerton House that you can see on the right-hand side as well. The turbine at Conkerton House is 17.75 metres to tip. This is the view across the valley showing the proposed location of the turbine. The distance is about 680 metres, and this was taken from the access road to Conkerton House. So in conclusion, it's considered that the proposed turbine would be out of scale with the landscape in the area, and it would dominate the valley and have a significant adverse impact on the landscape. Although it's situated about 3 kilometres from the Solway Coast Regional Scenic Area, it's considered the turbine would adversely affect the landscape character of the scenic area due to extensive visibility from views within the regional scenic area. So, for the reasons detailed in the report, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith, any questions at this point for the officer? No? Okay. We have one speaker, Mr. Robert Dodds, please. If you come forward, please. And we're going to get a drink in it. Mr. Dodds, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Robert Dodds, a 4th generation dairy farmer from Littleton. First of all, I would like to mention that I have a concern with the way the Planning Committee report has been put together. As I don't have time at the moment, I would be happy to discuss around 10 reasons at the end why this report is biased towards a refusal. As Judith said, one obvious mistake was the turbine is more than 80 metres from the A75. On a more positive note, Littleton is an expanding dairy farm where we're milking around 1,200 cows. Today we are employing 18 people on the farm. The dairy is one of the most modern in the area and something we're very proud of. Like the council, we are looking to reduce our carbon footprint through energy efficient measures and through the use of wind power. Our reason for the wind turbine, to reduce our power usage and cost in the farm, to reduce our carbon footprint to become the lowest in the UK. This was explained 3 months ago in the Galloway News and could be shown in an Eco2 report done recently. Make the most efficient use of available grid capacity. We have secured the grid capacity for the turbine. Elsewhere, the grid is full in the Stewartry and will limit any further small renewable projects in the area. We can get 100% bank funding and insurance for this size of turbine, where on smaller turbines this does not exist. The turbine will secure milk contracts for the future. This will let the farm expand and grow and thus provide further jobs for the area. Our milk buyer is Muir Wiseman, and we are the first dairy in the UK to set up a unique partnership. We have set a power purchase agreement where Muir will buy all excess power from the wind turbine. This will in turn reduce their carbon footprint as well. I have a letter explaining the tie-up with Muir's ambitions, and we have some booklets to show of Muir's sort of environmental sort of things going forward. Muir Wiseman produce around 2 million bottles of milk per day. Furthermore, we have agreed our story will be put on the side of all milk bottles like this Tesco bottle we have here, explaining the story of Littleton. By having our farm all these milk bottles, this is something we are very proud of. I also feel rather...
You've 30 seconds, Mr. Dodge.
That to attract tourists from the area will attract tourists to the farm. We have looked at various other sites and we have chosen this site to limit the visual impact. There has been one objector out of the 24 households within 1 mile. At Standingstone, we applied for a 62-metre turbine on top of the hill. Since then, we have reduced our turbine to 45 metres and came down the hill 20 metres. On the same Drumrae, there has been 2 turbines approved.
Could you wind up, please?
Okay, there's been 2 turbines approved at Ingleston and one on Moy Elevate side at Kirgunyon. And basically, I asked you to back a proposal, and finally the last thing is we've been shortlisted for the 4 farms in the UK for the RSPB Nature Farm Awards for some of the work that we've done at Littleton.
I must ask you to stop, Mr. Dodds.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Councillor McKee.
Yes, sir. And I suppose you've got a copy of the printout here, the pages we've got. The 1.8, the agents has stated in a supporting statement you own another farm to the east of Gatehouse, planning permission for 3 50-kilowatt turbines. You've built 2 and they are now working, but you can't get the third one up because due to grid restrictions, it hasn't been possible to erect the third one. Are you saying that this application here is not affected by those restrictions?
Yes, and at Littleton we've had a quote done for the grid and we'd have to run a brand new power supply back to Tungland, and that cost 600,000, which we have here as well. So it made the project unfeasible. and we have grid connection at Standingstone, and it's secured.
Any other questions for Mr Dodds? No? Okay, Mr Dodds, you can take your seat. Thank you. We're in session, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Maitland.
I'm afraid it's clear that the IPP and the landscape capacity study makes it quite clear that this is not, this is out with our policy. We should go with the recommendation.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Thompson, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I've got a wee question just about the IPP as set out in 4.4 in the report, page 37 of the papers. And it seems to suggest that actually the IPP, it would fall within those recommendations. I was just wondering if that could be clarified a wee bit. In that it's between 20 to 50 metres, it's out with a natura site, out with an area of potential constraint, etc. So I'm just wondering how that sits with the IPP.
That paragraph 4.4 is actually explaining which policy we're using. So, and I'm sorry, explains which typology that the application is being assessed against. We haven't actually gone in to sorting out the assessment at that point. It's within 20 to 50 metres. That's because it falls between the small to medium typology, and it's considered against WEP3, WEP3, and that the criteria highlighted are why it falls within that policy.
Does that answer your question?
It doesn't fully answer my question, really. No. I think what I'm really asking is that what that sets out in 4.4 and the being assessed against WEP3, which states the development will be considered favourably provided the council has concluded that, and then it lists the bullet points. That the Section 7 considerations are adequately resolved, that the proposal has no adverse effect on any natura site, which it goes on to say below that it doesn't. The proposal has no significant adverse effects on other areas of potential constraint, and it states below it falls out with areas of potential constraint, so I'd imagine that would be fine. Proposal has taken into account and responded to the Dumfries and Galloway wind farm landscape capacity study. So I'm just wondering if that's maybe where the area of issue is. Thank you.
Yes, we've considered it as not in accordance with the IPP, the wind farm capacity study. That's the part that we're recommending refusal, because we don't consider that it is in accordance with the landscape capacity study.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, ladies and gentlemen? Councillor McKee.
Just a comment, Chair, and I think with the photographs we've seen from the site looking out towards the coastline, I think it 4.12 addresses that Solway Coast Regional Scenic Area. I think the effect would be detrimental in that area, so I'm quite happy to support the recommendations.
Recommendations to refuse. Anyone otherwise minded? No? Okay. Paula?
The committee has determined to refuse the application on the grounds as set out in the officer's report.
Thank you. Item 6, erection of wind turbine, 50 metres height, 50 metres hub height, 78 metres to blade tip, associated transformer and meter housing, formation of access track and associated works at Drumrae Farm, near Whithorn, Newton Stewart. Mr Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is another application for a wind turbine in the Machars. It's a 78 metre high wind turbine on a site near Drumrae. I'll take you through a number of slides. This is an aerial view of the site with showing an approximate turbine position. It's on almost a high point of a drumline landform at that location. I would ask you to note in that view just Down and to the right of the site, the extensive forest plantation that's mentioned in the report on a number of occasions. This is a view of the site from the north and from the public road on the C11. Again, just an approximate turbine position. That would be the base of the turbine, obviously, on the drumline landform. The plantation to the left. This is a view from more or less the opposite direction. Again, on the C11, this is just adjacent to the former school at Ravenston, where there's a small group of cottages and a farm. That's a closer view of the site from the existing access from the public road. There is a proposal to form a short length of new private access track from that position up to the site itself. The next half dozen or so slides are simply a 360-degree view from the site. In other words, I'm standing on the site. I take a number of photographs through an arc of 360 degrees. It's just really to give you an impression of the surrounding countryside. So I'll go through these quite quickly. You can see it's peninsular landscape. This is looking to the south. This is looking seawards, south-southwest. It's very flat, rolling countryside, very little tree cover. It's very open. This is moving around now more to the north, northwest. And this would be more to the north. That's looking back up towards Drumrae farm itself, and the first viewpoint from the C11. That's similar. That's showing the farm in the distance. This is coming round again, showing the plantation starting to look more towards the east. This is looking towards the east. And again, that would be a view to the east. This is a more distant view of the site from the B7021 from Whithorn to Port William. Turbine would be more or less central in that view. The dark rising land on the right is again the plantation. Again, that's a more distant view, still from the B7021. The turbine would be left of centre in that view and would appear well above the plantation. We're looking over the plantation in this view. These are plans submitted by the applicant. This is a site plan showing the short access track, a crane pad, the turbine itself. In this case, you'll note that there's also a proposal for one or two metal container type box units to act as a transformer housing. That's just a view of the typical turbine itself, typical 3-blade turbine. This is cumulative within 5 kilometres of the site. There's nothing of particular mention there. The one dead centre is the application, so the 5 kilometre radius is centred on that. There's nothing of note particularly close. The closest turbine is at Ravenston, which would be maybe half a kilometre to a kilometre to the north-northeast. It's a 27-metre turbine. It's probably the highest turbine in the area at the moment. All the other ones you see that were approvals, the green ones, they were all the smaller ones that were the earlier turbines that came through, the Proven type turbines round about the 20 to 25 metre height range. There was one other 70 plus metre turbine proposal at Castle Wig, but that was refused under delegated powers. So the issues here are, not unexpectedly, we consider there's a significant adverse impact on landscape and visual. In this case, there is also an MOD objection, so there's a reason for refusal linked to that as well. So the recommendation is to refuse for the reasons stated in the report.
Thank you, Billy. Any questions for the officer in the first instance? Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. It's just that that woodland he showed, he reckoned it's almost served its lifetime. Have you consulted with the Forestry Commissioner, whoever owns that land, to see if it's going to be cut down?
No, Councillor, we haven't in this case, because I think simply because our view is that it makes little difference whether it's there or not, because it's not mitigating the visual effects in any way. So, you know, if it's there, it's very adverse. If it's gone, it's even worse. So we didn't think there was a need.
Any Any other questions? We're in session.
Agree the recommendation. Agree the recommendation, Chair.
Anyone otherwise minded? Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy enough to support the recommendation. I would point out that the base for this turbine is a shallow drumlin at a height of about 70 metres. The turbine on top of that gives an overall height of 148 metres. The highest point in the Machers is 146 metres. Consequently, this turbine would actually be the highest feature in the Machers Peninsula. And that explains the extensive nature of the ZTB you've just seen. That it would be a very significant visual intrusion and would be entirely out of proportion with the landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McComb. Is anyone otherwise minded? No? Paula?
The committee is determined to refuse the application on the grounds set out in the officer's report.
Thank you. Item 7, construction of vehicular access tracks to access Glen Chamber Wind Farm at land between the U8W Public Road at Glenluce and the C3W Public Road to the west of Tarth Bridge. Access to Glen Chamber Wind Farm. David.
Thank you, Chair. Both Mr Duncan and Mr Barker are on holiday at the moment, so you've got me. You'll be aware that there was an application for 11 wind turbines at Glen Chamber that was refused at this committee. It went to an appeal and it was approved. There were 3 routes given as part of that application for construction traffic in the environmental impact assessment. The reporter didn't actually specify any route as being favoured from these 3, but did require that a traffic management plan be submitted, and there was a condition requiring compliance with environmental impact assessment. Now, the applicants have looked into this and have now confirmed that they wish to choose option 2 from that, which is basically using the former A75. However, it is slightly different route from that shown in the application site boundaries. It's moved out slightly from that, therefore it triggers the need for a new planning application. Paragraph 1.7 of the report sets out the precise works which are shown, and I'll take you through those in the slide as well. So the first plan that you see in front of you there is the route. Now, travelling from north to south, it's probably best if you look at page 71 of your agenda notes. Billy, if you can go to the next one. What will happen is basically the turbines coming in from, it's assumed they'll come in from the west, but even if they come in from the east, it's the same thing. It will be just to the east of Glenluce on the A75. They will turn off and come down the road into Glenluce, but then turn right down the old A75, or the U80W as it is now, using this junction. And then the next slide shows the actual start of the application site. So that's the southernmost part of your site boundary shown on page 71. Now, this junction here, junction will be widened out to the right-hand side of the junction, and the next photo moves further along to the old railway line, and just where the car is parked there, that will be widened out to allow very heavily loading HGVs to come around that corner. And the next slide shows just past the old railway bridge, that area there will also be widened out. The road will then carry on and will use the report's been slightly superseded by events. I think at the time it was written it said the Carscrew Wind Farm, if it goes ahead, well, it clearly is. It will also utilise the same wind farm access that you see here, and the next 3 slides really just show that access road in development. And the next one shows the same. So basically that route will then follow through. There will then need to be, depending whether there's a sub-option 1 or 2 that fall both within the application site, the developer's not quite decided which one to do, but it will be either 600 metres or 1.2 kilometres extra from Carscrew access to join into the C3W road. One of the options, we'll bring it out at this slide here. Thereafter, it will carry along that road. Then it will follow the Glen Chamber access, the Glen Chamber Farm access, which will be widened as need be until it meets up finally with another unadopted road, the U8 to 9W, which will then provide the site access. So basically, in short, this is a permission which has been granted. We have received the application here to show the variations in the final route which is being proposed. There are some benefits which would be had in terms of the amount of traffic going on the A75 would be shortened by using this, and there would be also some long-term benefits in having some improvements at junctions and road widths. So, subject to a number of conditions which you see at the end of the report, we are recommending approval.
Thank you. Any questions for the officer at this stage? Councillor Maitland.
Yes, 1.7, I'm just wanting to really sort of understand the proposal. It's 1.7 on page 74. The proposal involves the construction of certain track and alignment, widening, strengthening, other improvements. You can imagine this wasn't our idea. I mean, I have to say, I don't think, and we would normally be quite sort of picky about the effect upon our landscape and our road system of a big industrial development such as this is. Now, given it's going to happen, what I need to know is what is going to be the effect on the roads, what they're going to look like. Because, I mean, you know, the roads engineers consider the widening of a road to be an improvement. I don't think actually in a tourist area that's always the case, and I think one needs to look at this thing quite carefully and sensitively. I think we should be careful about what we permit to happen. You look at those photographs and they actually constitute a scar on the landscape. So I want to know what is actually being proposed in terms of the numbers of widenings and what we're actually going to have. It's not clear from the report. David?
Yes, probably the reason why Peter didn't put them in the presentation is I have the plans here, and there's some 30-odd A1 size plans showing exactly what's going on, so it is quite detailed. The roads, particularly when it comes up to the very last bit, the track going through Glen Chamber Farm itself is quite narrow. It can be just over 2 metres in some places. Depending on the route of the HGV's line, it will need to be widened out between 3 to, at some points where there's corners, up to 5 metres in width. So it will have an effect. I don't think there's any getting away from that, but the bottom line is they actually have a permission for this already from the reporter. What this is doing is, because it's very slightly moving out with the application site boundary of the original wind farm, it triggers the need for a further application. But the difficulty that, as you've rightly pointed out, is we kind of have to accept the position that we're in. It's a case of damage limitation. That's why you've got quite a lot of pretty stringent conditions, I think, attached to, if you actually look at page, it starts on page 77 and then goes through to page 80. There's quite some detailed conditions there requiring details of exactly how this is going to be done, to be submitted particularly with the roads officers as well, to make sure that the disruption to the area is limited to as little as possible.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Maitland? Or were you meaning
I'm grateful for the expansion of what is happening. Yes, I suppose really what I'm concerned about, and I know that other members have been concerned about, is the industrialisation of what is not an industrial environment. We're not going to get curbs, are we? We're not going to get, you know, it's that sort of thing which I want to be absolutely sure that eventually nature will creep back across the roads.
Yes, that much I can assure you. Certainly the drawings I've been through, just double checking them, they are widening out the tarmac area, but it's not going to be curbed or anything like that all the way along. No, I mean, it is going to be, well, that adds additional cost to the developer, so they're going to not be doing any more than they have to do anyway. It's primarily widening it out to allow various key pinch points on corners and on narrow tracks to make it capable of taking the large loads which are going to be coming along. But there is, Peter in his report makes some comment to the fact about the effect it would actually have, but considers that it would over time have some regeneration at the sides of it. So what you're saying in the slides there is probably as bad as it's going to be.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions before we have a speaker? But any other questions at this point? No? Okay. We have one speaker, Mr. Simon Herriot, please. Mr. Herriot, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Simon Herriot. I'm the agent acting on behalf of the applicant here. Just want to bring forward a few points that I don't think maybe quite come out in the committee report. First and foremost is the access is actually just for abnormal loads to the site, i.e. the components that will be used to construct the wind turbine. Other construction traffic will not use it. In that respect, the actual number of vehicles that will be accessing the site will be 88, basically 11 turbines, 8 deliveries for each turbine. So it'll be a temporary use in effect over the anticipated construction period, which is probably going to be 6 months. After that, it will not be used unless there are any requirements for maintenance or replacement parts, which will need that particular access to be used. As the presentation, the committee report made clear, this was one of 3 options that was put forward in the original wind farm environmental assessment. And since that time, the applicant has done quite a bit of due diligence in assessing the relative merits of those 3 options, technically, environmentally, residential amenity and things like that, and have decided that this is the one that offers the least disruption, and as the officer report refers, wider long-term benefits. And I think those benefits, we're talking about road safety benefits. I do appreciate the councillor's earlier comment that it will have a landscape impact. Certainly in the slides we've seen for the Glen Chamber access, that is work in progress at the moment, which will bed in and heal, as will this. But the benefits we're talking about are road safety, widening of the road in particular instances. Excuse me. The route really incorporates elements of improvements to the existing public highway where required, new sections of track, and improvements of private sections of track. And the idea behind using the existing track that's been constructed for the Carscrew wind farm was to minimise land take as far as possible, try and reuse what's already there. And that was sort of central to the choice of this particular route, as was impact upon residential amenity, large vehicles travelling along public roads. It was a major it is a major development proposal, and it was therefore subject to the statutory pre-application consultation, which was held before the application was submitted. So there was quite a wide dissemination of the proposal to the public pre-application stage. As I say, once the wind farm is constructed, the new section effectively will be fenced off, and it will not be made open or be used by members of the public. The public highway obviously will, and as we say, that we think that's going to have long-term benefits in terms of widening pinch points for road safety. I think the last point really is that there is a wealth of engineering documents that have been submitted with the application showing key sections of the entire route and the proposed improvements. We are aware that there will be some tweaks that may be needed to those to fulfil your roads officer's comments, and they'll be addressed by planning conditions. But I can assure the members that an awful lot of engineering as well as environmental due diligence has gone into this project, and as I say, a large portion of that sitting on the desk in front of you. So really, just to reiterate, the officer report correctly concludes that the development complies with development plans. There are no objections from any of the statutory consultees, and the council's own roads authority is happy with it, subject to conditions. And on that basis, I would applaud the recommendation for conditional approval.
Thank you, Mr. Herriot. Any questions for Mr. Herriot? Councillor Maitland.
Sorry, I can't resist it. We've been told twice, Mr. Herriot, that this is going to improve road safety, and you're majoring on that. So, would you like to tell me, please, how many accidents there have been on that area up till now? What are we dealing with? What are we going to improve?
In terms of the number of accidents, I don't know is the answer. As I say, this was an application that was developed with the roads officers. We held pre-application meetings, so they were taken to site and basically walked the length of the route with the applicant's engineers and identified areas that would require improvement to facilitate the loads themselves, and also areas that would merit from improvement in general. So I can't answer the question about the number of accidents, but I think the widening of the road and the improvement of sight lines at certain particular junctions can only but have an improvement in terms of road safety, and that's again highlighted in the officer's report.
Thank you. So there's no baseline. Thank you very much indeed.
Mr. Herriot, you mentioned that there were 88 loads going along this route. How are you bringing in the concrete, the diggers, and all the other infrastructure stuff?
Those vehicle movements will be coming in via route to the north, which was presented as option 1 in the original environmental impact assessment, and again it is in the information pack there. That was made quite clear in the appeal statement and reporter's findings. So they'll be coming into the north. As I say, this access is just solely related to the abnormal loads, and it was felt that the route to the north, I wouldn't say not suitable for abnormal loads, but this one was felt to be the best option of the 3 that were presented.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, just the abnormal loads. Where they're originating from? Are they coming in through Glenluce Bay, or are they coming by sea? And where are they originating from?
The short answer to that is at the moment not sure. It depends upon the procurement and particularly the construction of the wind turbines. As alluded to in the presentation earlier, the likelihood is they will be coming from the west and travelling that way, but the route has been developed in such a way that if they were to come from the east, they could equally accommodate that. So I can't answer your question at this point in time, just because that will be subject to procurement at a later stage.
I can tell you they mostly come from the west, and that's quite right, but they're erecting a wind farm at the moment, not this company, but another company, and it's coming from the east, because I met 2 lorries on the road this morning, coming down the Gatehouse bypass. Any other questions for Mr. Herriot? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Herriot. You can take your seat. We're in session, ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Ogilvie.
I think with the level of conditions placed on this and listen to the planning officer, we'll just go with the recommendations. There's not much more we can do.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Councillor McKay.
I'd note one of the representations, previous wind farm developers and developments have not repaired local roads used to an acceptable standard. It's just to ensure that that sort of roads maintenance is continued over the piece.
I'm quite satisfied that the actual wording that we have of these conditions is probably more robust than those which the reporter attached in the original appeal decision.
Councillor Dempster.
Nothing to add to you other than to say I concur with the sentiments that Councillor Maitland has expressed, that we see picturesque valleys improved, for want of terminology, but sometimes improved, as this is you saying in inverted commas, but happy to support the recommendation in this case.
Paula.
The committee has determined to approve the recommendation subject to the conditions as set out in the officer's report.
Thank you. Item 8, siting of 2 linked porta-cabin buildings to form an office, workshop and associated accommodation, formation of 3 car parking spaces, erection of boundary fencing and access gate, formation of access at Barnkirk Depot, Newton Stewart. Mr. Murray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is another application at the Bannockburn Roads Depot at Newton Stewart. In this case, it's for 2 link porta-cabins to replace an existing timber building which is no longer fit for purpose. The use of the building is as a base for individuals carrying out community service orders. So it's a base, it's got a workshop, it's got some facilities. My understanding is that most of the time, weather permitting, that community service work is carried out away from that base. So that's an aerial view of the site. The roads depot in the centre. You'll see just left of centre, there's a vertical dark line of trees. That's Scots pine trees. The site is just at the widening out at the bottom of that, immediately adjacent to the access into the roads depot. I would point out perhaps in this view that where you see the cars parked to the left of that dark vertical line, that's the site where there is an approval for the household waste recycling development. When that's going to go ahead, I know not at this stage, but when that is developed, the cars you see parked there in that car park, that car parking facility has to be relocated to within the roads depot itself, in other words, to the right of that vertical dark line. So there were some concerns in terms of this application that there's quite a lot of pressure on parking in that area at the moment. I mean, in that aerial view there are a few cars there, but the last time I was up taking site photographs there were 26 cars parked in that car park. Now, when that site's developed, they're all going to have to be moved inside the roads depot. So we were quite careful in considering this application in terms of what kind of additional parking it might generate. But we're quite satisfied having had indicative numbers from the applicant in terms of number of staff on site and how they transport the people on the community service orders to and from the site and ours. They pick them up from another location. In other words, they won't travel there with their own vehicles at any time. So we're quite satisfied that the parking, the existing parking, and relocated from the domestic waste recycling plant when it comes into being will not be compromised. So this is a view of the site and the existing building from the south. You'll note the Scots pine trees up that boundary. 12 of these will have to be removed, which is somewhat unfortunate because these would have been planted as a condition of the original approval for the roads depot itself. However, we accept that the site can't be developed without removing these 12 trees. The remainder that you see further in the distance will stay in situ. And given again that the land to the left of these trees is to be developed for the recycling centre, that will in itself provide a degree of screening between the public road and the site. This is a slightly more distant view from the south, from within the roads depot. This is a view mainly to show the trees. There's comments in the report about slight concerns about the proximity of 3 accesses. That's partly because, again, when the recycling facility is developed, where you see these cars parked on the left, that will be the exit from that site. That site is to have a one-way system where cars go in, deposit their waste, and they'll come back out. So they'll come back out this way. So there will be cars exiting towards us on the left there, cars entering and exiting the roads depot itself by the gate you can just see on the right. And additionally now, there will also be cars entering and exiting the application site. That is what has generated the condition in discussion with the roads officer that appropriate signage and road lining will be an important feature at that location, which is why we've imposed a condition to secure that. This is a view of the site from the north, again showing the trees, the existing timber building in the distance, which is to be relocated to elsewhere within the site. That's a closer view of that building itself. That's the application site and the proposed site for the relocation of the existing building. Plans and elevations of the porta-cabin units. East and west elevations. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor? Councillor No, sorry. I'll start again. Any questions for Mr. Murray? Councillor Maitland.
Yes. Gosh, are you quite sure that that fine example of a late 20th century wooden commercial building is not listed? What I was going to actually ask is the recycling centre. Have we had planning permission for that? Yes. And what was agreed with respect to shrubbery and that sort of thing? We're removing some. I just wonder whether we thought about that at the time. That's the first question. And the next question on the recycling centre has temporarily gone out of my mind, so I'll remember it in a minute. But the issue about about being sure that we've got suitable landscaping and all the rest of it, because I think there's an issue there, having taken those down.
Well, there was no consideration given to the trees in question here at the time the recycling centre was considered in 2011, I think it was 2011, 2010, 2011, because as far as we were aware at that time, these trees were under no threat. But I am satisfied that in terms of the recycling centre itself, appropriate measures would be in place to mitigate as much as is possible, given that we're in an industrial context there. And there's now other industrial, I mean, perhaps if I go back to the first slide, I could. It's not wide enough to show, but obviously the application site itself and the roads depot, all of that is an established business and industrial area in the local plan. If you see in the left of the picture, the Barncat Road running north-south more or less, you can see on the left of that road the dark grey area. That is an extensive electricity substation. Just to the land immediately to the northwest of that was identified as reserved industrial land in the local plan. We've recently granted planning permission for a single-user industrial development on that site. So that will be developed for industry. So the context is changing, so it will become more industrialised. However, I'm quite satisfied. If you look at the site of the recycling centre, you see the little track to the northwest of it. That's an emergency access track that runs up to a DGHP housing development at Glebe Crescent. There is established shrubbery and bushes along there, and also the land beyond that to the northwest is a recreational area, which will stay as a recreational area, and there's existing planting there. So I'm quite comfortable that in as much as the recycling site can be, its impact can be mitigated, I'm quite satisfied that I'm comfortable with that.
Councillor McKay.
Thanks, Chair. It just seems as if we're creating a road structure that's going to lead to accidents. Is the local hospital looking for business or something? I wonder what, just that you've got accesses and egresses and all that sort of thing all coming together in the one spot. I wonder what the road's view was of it.
Roundabout.
Well, I was wondering about traffic lights, actually.
As mentioned in the report, I think I cover that in paragraph 4 or 5 of the report. It's been the subject of quite a bit of discussion with the roads officer, and it was concluded that given the low level of use, the roads officer raised no objection but indicated that appropriate signage and road markings would be important. Therefore, we've recommended a condition to agree that road marking and signage and to secure that to protect road safety. I mean, it's also fair to say that, it's off the public road, so it's not well, obviously the public will use the recycling centre, but it's off the public road. Speeds will be very low. Types of vehicles using it will be slow moving in any event. I think with appropriate signage and road lining, there should be no significant threat to road safety or indeed personal safety.
but although it's got to be a low usage at the present moment, once the recycling facility comes in, that could increase the traffic quite a bit. So it's something I suppose you'll monitor at that time, just to keep an eye on things.
Well, that was clearly a consideration that was at the forefront of our thoughts in considering this. It is a one-way system, an in-out system for the recycling centre, so when people are leaving that you know, there will have to be, as I say, appropriate signage, a stop sign, you know, vehicles entering from the left, something like that. Obviously that's for the expertise of my colleagues in roads to determine under the terms of the condition.
Councillor Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions. I thought you had said in your presentation earlier, Billy, that the wooden porta-cabin, the wooden hut had outlived its useful life, and yet I see according to the paper it's been relocated elsewhere within the site. And the other more important question is, you talk about two link porta-cabins, the dimensions would be 28 metres by 4 by 3. Is that the overall dimensions, or is that each porta-cabin?
Taking your questions in reverse, that is the overall dimensions, yes. Once they're linked, that will be the total size of the resultant building. I think when I said in my presentation with regard to the existing building, when I said it was no longer fit for purpose, I didn't mean that in technical terms. In other words, the construction, I meant it was no longer big enough. They need more space. So, you know, it's in reasonable condition to be reused for another purpose.
As a throwaway line, it's a pity we're needing more space given the purpose it's serving.
Yeah, well, you have the point there, Dennis.
I was just going to say, I think we've had the arguments, Chair. I think I just remove the recommendations for approval.
Anyone otherwise minded? No? Okay, Paula.
Committee is determined to approve the application subject to conditions as set out in the officer's report.
Thank you. Right, item number 9, cutting and filling of existing grass football pitch and formation of synthetic football/rugby pitch with spectator rail and infill panelling, erection of 5-metre high ball stop perimeter fencing and 8 15-metre high floodlighting columns at Blairmont Park, Newton Stewart. Mr Murray, you're having a busy day.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat the description of the application in this case. Effectively, this is a proposal for a synthetic sports pitch to replace an existing grass pitch with 5-metre high fencing and floodlighting at Blairmont Park at Newton Stewart. It's based on a long-established football pitch used by Newton Stewart Football Club and others. Again, this is an aerial view of the site. The pitch is dead centre in that view, just to the northeast of the trees. There's a kind of triangular area there. The pitch is at the bottom, and I don't know if the pointer will show there. That is the pavilion, the pitch here, so the synthetic pitch will go in that area there. That's a view of the site from the east. There's the description of the application mentions cutting and filling. There are no substantial earthworks. There's a minor amount of cut and fill. There's a slight embankment there that rises on the right. That rises up to another pitch, which I would know as the hockey pitch, but that's from the 1960s, where I played my one and only game of hockey, and I've still got the scars to show for it. That's another view of the pitch towards the trees. There is some mention in the report of possibility of red squirrels in these trees. There have been some concerns from SNH and others as to possible threat to red squirrels if any of the trees were to be removed. The applicant has indicated that at this stage there's no intention or need to remove any trees. However, adopting a precautionary approach, we've recommended a condition to secure surveys and appropriate methodology if it was found when we moved on to site that some tree works were required. That's a view of the pitch on the right and the existing pavilion, unsurfaced access track that runs through the park, used by the public. That's a block plan showing the site and the pavilion. This is just a layout of the pitch. Detail of a typical section and the floodlighting columns detail of the flood lighting columns and heads. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions.
Any questions? Councillor McCone.
One wee quibble with regard to condition 2, the hours of operation. Now, I don't have a problem with Monday to Friday. However, on the Saturday and Sunday, operations would cease at 8 p.m. Now, that would make it very difficult indeed to have an evening game of football organised. You would require to kick off at 6 p.m. I would have thought 9 p.m. would have been a more appropriate time to finish use of the facility.
These are not hours recommended by planning officers. These are the hours that are proposed by the applicant. We have simply reinforced them with that condition, so that is the hours that they have given us.
I'm certainly surprised at the very, very early closure on the Saturday and Sunday evening. I would have thought, in view of the fact that this is likely to be used for club football, a starting time of 6 p.m. would be inappropriate.
I think the most we can possibly do, sorry, with David's agreement, is just draw your comments to the attention of the applicants and see if they're
if they wish to reconsider
with that, and if they wish to amend it, would it be possible to change that, David, at that stage? Or?
Well, I was going to say that's what they've applied for, but you as a planning committee have the discretion to put whatever hours of operation you feel appropriate. So just because very often it's the other way around, that somebody's applied for something too much and you've pegged it back down. But equally, it's open to yourselves to expand it out if you feel that is going to allow more flexibility. As Billy pointed out, there is actually that clause at the end, unless otherwise agreed in writing with the Council's planning authority in advance on the basis of a justified special short-term need. So there is that flexibility there if there was going to be some tournament that was going to be going off as a one-off event. But we've assessed it on the basis of what was applied for, but it's open to yourselves to vary that condition as you see fit.
The other thing I would perhaps mention also is that, in terms of hours of operations at weekends and particularly on Sundays, you normally look at earlier finishes on Sundays. I would remind members that there is residential development just at the north of the site. If you can see the roofs of the houses there. There's a residential development there which is immediately adjacent to the car park that would be used for any games that were going on. So that's a factor you might have to take into consideration in terms of considering later use of the facility at weekends and, as I say, particularly Sundays.
Councillor Maitland, did you wish to come in? No. Councillor Dempster?
Thanks, Chair. It's probably to do with winter time hours, this application, whereby floodlights will be required in the later part of a football game being played, because it's unusual for amateur footballers to play on a Saturday night or a Sunday night. And I would just support the recommendation. I'm more envious about where you get the money to put it in, rather as the hours that they're going to operate on. I think it's just be a standard application. I would just approve it.
We'd hate to get the green-eyed monster to get the better, Jim. Councillor Ogilvie.
It's more or less the same. These people aren't stupid. The lower usage historically, all they're changing is from a grass pitch to a synthetic pitch, which might allow for all year round training. But they all know what they're doing. They're doing a business case to make this stack up. So by them putting in 6 o'clock, they know there'll be no demand after that. I think David's given us a way forward is that there is flexibility there if they feel after it's established that there is a requirement for slightly later for one-off occasions or for tournaments, then it's there anyway. It's open to them. So I've no problem with the recommendations as they stand.
I think we're into session now. Councillor Gilroy.
Yes, it's just to get back to recommendation 2, but it's to do with the floodlights. Presumably they are only used when they're needed, insofar as there's a system whereby they're not on when there's nobody playing, because I just think that is so irritating. But I don't know, do they have floodlights at the moment?
No, there's no floodlights at the moment. And just, again, condition 2 is the operation and use of the synthetic sports pitch and floodlights. So basically, the floodlights would be covered by that hours of operation condition as well.
Could I also add to that? I was just trying to find where I'd said it in the report, but it's to be operated under an agreement between the council and Newton Stewart Football Club. In other words, Newton Stewart Football Club will be the operator. So as well as the planning conditions, there's an obligation in that legally binding agreement and how the pitch and the use of the pitch and the lighting up times are also controlled there. So there's 2 levels of controls there. So again, I'm quite comfortable with the situation as it is.
Sorry, just to come back on that, it's not the level of control, it's the fact that, there's no means whereby that if somebody forgets to turn the lights off, they just stay on, and they can be on for hours with nobody there playing on them. And it's a bit like having a street light on in the middle of the day. It really irritates people. And I wonder if, and in some play areas, the floodlights, if they have them, are activated because there's motion going on, there's people around. And therefore that's the only way they work. And if there's nobody there, they don't work.
I don't have that level of detailed knowledge about how these floodlights will operate, whether there's a time switch to legislate for the, I have to say, unlikely circumstance where somebody forgets to switch the lights off. So I really can't answer that question. I would suspect, however, that there will be something in place, but I can't confirm that.
Councillor Maitland.
Well, I have great sympathy, actually. I've got sympathy with Councillor McComb's point about the timings, in fact, because I'm pretty sure that if you change a grass pitch to an all-weather, the demand changes, no question about it, and at different times. But the issue about the lighting, yes, I've had occasion to ring up the council and to say, why are the lights burning in Lockerbie at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? And the answer is because nobody's going to go down there and turn them on when they're actually needed at 7 o'clock, which I think is outrageous, and it really annoys people. The other side of it is when they don't do or don't turn off. And I don't know whether we can condition it that the type of lighting they have to use is to do with it's motion activated. I'd ask the question whether that's possible to do it, because I am entirely with Councillor Gilroy on this one.
I mean, technically, it is possible to have that condition. It's just whether it meets the test of being reasonable and being necessary. I think you have in condition 2 a clear planning requirement, which is really looking at the simultaneous operation of the sports pitch and the floodlights shouldn't be out with these hours. I don't particularly think it's actually necessary to have a further condition to that effect, because A, they're going to be spending a fortune on operating it on electricity if they do that. Secondly, I think if they're operating it out with these hours, then neighbours will be fairly quickly on to our planning inspector, who would remind them of the terms of their condition there.
Councillor McCoxey.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the planning restrictions there with every one of these artificial pitches. What you're referring to now is the operational issues, and that should be dealt with through Richard Greaveson and his people. They've got the service level agreement signed with the various clubs. And at the end of the day, it's not the council that's paying for the floodlights, it'll be the Newton Stewart Football Club. So it's in their best interest to make sure that the lights are off when the pitch isn't being used. It's them that's paying for it.
I'm sure Andy McClement will be there with a big switch or something. Does this mean that yeah, I think so, but I'm just going to ask Billy a question. Does this mean the demise of the Newton Stewart bonfire at Guy Fawkes? Because, well, at the moment the bonfire's held immediately to the side. There's a hardcore area. If you see the track leading down to Pavilion in that photograph, on that slide, there's a hardcore area halfway down that track, and that's where the bonfire is held. And I would hate a spark to land on the 3G pitch. Councillor McKee.
We're arguing here about things. Newton Stewart Football Club has got a contract with the council to run that facility, and that facility is there for public use as well. It's not just for their use. So I would think there should be somebody in charge there when that facility is in use. And as I say, it's more or less available at any time youngsters want to use it, or any person wants to use it. So it's up to Newton Stewart to ensure, football club to ensure that these things don't happen. My only query was why 8 floodlights? That seems an awful lot for islands, but that's an issue, I'll no worry about that.
We have a recommendation to approve. Is anyone otherwise? Stephen Thompson, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a minor comment on the use of the motion detecting floodlights. Normally when you're playing a game of football, you would play a ball into a space, and if you can't see where the space is because the floodlights are off because nobody's moving about in that particular area, then it's hard to gauge where you would pass the ball to. So it was really just, I think that number 2 there, that's just how you operate, you know, playing a game of football when the lighting's difficult. So happy to go with that.
Is everyone reasonably happy?
Yes.
Great. Paula?
Committee has determined to approve the application subject to conditions as set out in the officer's report.
Okay. Item number 10, formation of cycle/footpath, including construction of footbridge, raised boardwalk and stock-proof fencing at Carruchan to Dalscaith Road, Dumfries. Claire Eckstein, please. We're meaning to get it for the sale of the Sanker Primary School.
Thank you, Chair. I'll combine the presentation for items 10 and 11 as both relate to adjoining phases of the cycle footpath scheme. So item 10 is the phase which runs from the U220N on the bottom left of the photograph across the Crookspow northeastwards towards the U221N, which is the Carruchan Beaches Road. And then item 11 is the phase which runs from the U22N to the edge of Isle Steps Village. And that's just a update of that photo. So this shows the proposed route for the first phase from Dalscaith Road up to Carruchan Beaches Road, and shows the details of the boardwalk, which will be to the south of Crookspow. And this shows the footbridge that will be made across Crookspow. Going on to the photographs, this is the existing access point from the Moss Dalscaith Road, looking up the field boundary towards Crookspow, which is the sort of in the trees in the centre. And then this is a marshy area beside Crookspow for the proposed boardwalk. And this shows the existing crossing point over the Crookspow. And then looking from that crossing point from Crookspow northeastwards up the field boundary. This is where the cycle track will follow. And then along the proposed track, which will be along the trees to the left, then turning around the camera position, looking up the close-up of the beech trees next to the route and looking towards Carruchan Beaches Road. And then this would be the existing crossing point at Carruchan Beaches Road. So you've got looking up from the access point to Carruchan Beaches towards the Dalscaith Moss Road, and then to the other side, which is the following item, which is the application from Isle Steps to Carruchan Beaches Road. So that's showing the plans of that route. And then this is showing the access point from Isle Steps, which is, you can see the field access just to the right-hand side of the photograph. And then looking down towards Isle Steps Village, you'll follow the field boundary. Then back up again along the field boundary towards the trees. They'll go through the gap in the trees. And then looking down the field boundary towards the crossing point at Carruchan Beaches Road. The full assessment of the sites is set out in the committee report for both items, and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions regarding that the crossing point details are agreed with the Roads Authority along Curragh Beaches Road.
Claire, any questions for Claire? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just explain to me what a surface binder course is?
That's what the roads require. So I'm not a roads engineer, so I don't know precisely what that is. I can't answer your query.
It's basically hardcore.
Yeah.
It's hardcore, and it's the crushed rock which binds together automatically, more or less.
Thank you.
Councillor Blake.
Yeah. Claire, can I ask you to go back to the photographs for the access point to aisle steps? Yeah, that one would show it too, and that one. The house on the left-hand side it gets a lot of flooding from the field behind. I mean, really, the water comes through the garden like a waterfall. They've actually got holes bored right along the front wall. The water also comes down onto that road and flows down there at quite a rate. Is there any flood mitigation for that?
I'm not aware. I'll have a quick look at the plans, but I'm not aware of any. I mean, it's the detail that's been submitted for that.
As with most of these things, basically, if there's an existing problem, you can't really use a planning application to mitigate for that, but you can make sure it's not making it any worse. So we just have to be satisfied that the materials going in weren't going to increase the rate of runoff, basically.
That's certainly my concern about that it may actually make it worse. In addition, the road itself I've been at that house on a couple of occasions, and it was virtually unusable because of the amount of water coming down from the field. Also on the main road further along, on the left, you see the main road heading out Earl Steps. There's a flooding issue there coming from the same field. It's at the new bus stop.
Okay, Councillor Witts.
Thank you, Chair. I'm totally in favour of this. I think the more things we can do for cycling, the better, the active sports and all that, active lifestyle. I wanted to ask Claire, obviously there are sites of archaeological significance in the first part of the application, and I take it that if we uncover something highly significant during the course of our construction work, that would determine the course of action that we had to take in the future. And incidentally, Chairman, I always understood that it was St Kieran of Ireland who was the saint from whose name this is comes from, but I stand to be corrected. And I also understand that the waters of St Querin's Well are highly useful for tired cyclists, because there was an article in the papers some years ago, a gentleman from the Dumfries Cycling Club who stuck his feet in the water there, and he says it was great and his arthritis disappeared. But obviously, thank you for your kindness and allowing me to depart from normal planning comments.
David or Claire?
Well, as far as the archaeological side of things, if you look on page 100, the archaeologist is saying no objections, but it is advising that we add a directive. So that's not listed as a condition here because directives aren't basically listed on committee reports, but yes, it will be added as that.
No other points? Councillor Ogilvie, are you about to spring into action?
I was going to ask a question of governance. Before there was a dissension recorded, but there was no reason given for the dissension. I just wondered if the reason should have been given.
I will look to governance for the answer for that.
I'm not aware of reasons for dissension being noted in the minutes, so I wouldn't actually
from my experience, you've normally just had a minute saying so-and-so notes their dissension, but I've never seen a justification for it. It's usually evident in the debate.
Okay. Are we happy to agree items 10 and 11? Well, I will, but just I'll start with Councillor McCautry.
Yeah, I took a copy of these plans along to the local community council and we're totally underwhelmed by them. Really no great comment to make. I think the public apathy towards this has been overwhelming. And personally, I think there's better uses of the money could be put to, like repairing potholes, than putting in some of these cycle paths that lead to nowhere and would probably used by one man and his dog.
Councillor Blake.
Yeah, just to check, is there any need to put some sort of condition on that access so that the flooding issue isn't made worse?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can add a condition if that's what the committee wants, to have details regarding flooding matters to be submitted. That can be done.
Councillor McKee.
I just, in response to Councillor McCautry, I'll bring to his notice another councillor's notices. And a few years ago, there was a cycle club set up in northwest Dumfries, and they took 15 youngsters out to Maybe Forest with their bikes. And not one of these youngsters had been out to Maybe Forest before. So if this cycle route enables them to get out there and get their exercise and enjoyment, so much the better.
Councillor Witts. Councillor Witts.
Yes, thank you. I do concur with what Councillor McKee has said, and that road is quite heavily used by people going to Maybe Forest and on bikes, and as a safety worry for people with younger people. The serious cyclists don't have a problem, but younger people, I think, to encourage them to do this sort of thing, I concur. Just one area of concern, though, is it's a bit. I hope eventually we can link up this route because we're already in a bit nearer the town. So I presume that will eventually come forward in due course.
Not ours to ponder on. Councillor Blake, did you want to put are you proposing an amendment? Another condition?
I was just asking advice if I found that necessary. I would hate that condition, that the flooding effect that house has just now to be made worse because of this. So it's just, I don't know, I'm asking advice if a condition word around that could be made.
There has been no consultation, as far as I can see, with SEPA or the flood risk team in the council, but it's quite competent to attach a condition just requiring details of exactly how that issue is going to be addressed. I think that's quite reasonable. Quite happy to draft a condition for the committee on that basis.
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial. If you could see the retaining wall at the front, there's a similar retaining wall at the back, and the flood level actually goes up to and over that and comes into the property.
Members happy to get David to put a condition in? Okay. Paula, item number 10 first.
Okay. The committee has determined to approve the application subject to conditions under a further condition requiring...
That's item 11.
No, item 11, flooding only. That's why I asked, right. So item 10 is approved subject to conditions as set out in the report. And the committee has also determined to approve item 11 subject to conditions under addition of a further condition requiring submission of details regarding flooding.
Okay. Councillor McKee.
Chair, just to raise an issue again. You may recall at the last meeting I raised the issue of late applications. When I look at this week's applications, I didn't count them, but there's a great number, and it's happened recently over the past few months from DGHP, late applications for this warm air heating. Now, I got into bother last time I raised it because I upset somebody, but it needs to be addressed. Why should we talk to about an individual with a late application when DGHP is doing it all the time, and they're coming in with about 9 or 10 at a time? They need to be told, either get the application in time or we'll refuse them and you've got to take the things out. Then you can go back and put them in again.
I think it's not telling tales to say that Mr. Rogers and myself were somewhat unimpressed by the approach of DGHP to this. They have put in 1,000 air-sourced heat pumps. They're all there. Currently, we have 240 applications have been submitted, so we've only got a quarter of the applications. That was their commercial decision, but we have met with James Shirazi and expressed our extreme displeasure at the way they've carried this out and didn't feel it was appropriate for a public body of that nature to be carrying out that level of unauthorised alterations. Their defence was that they didn't realise, basically in England, air-sourced heat pumps below a certain level don't actually require planning permission, they're permitted development. And they had a letter from a former area planning manager at a time when legislation was uncertain as to whether or not they required, saying he didn't think they required permission. So on that basis, they installed 1,000. Unfortunately, they missed the fact that there were 2 letters from 2 other APMs that said, actually, you do require. So, yes, we've had a lot of discussions with them. They are in situ, and therefore all we can really do is seek applications. We've made it clear that not all of them are likely to be approved, and we will require quite a number of them to actually be relocated. So we're dealing with the ones which are straightforward at the moment, but there are still a significant number which we are not happy to approve.
Would it be beneficial, sorry, Chair, would it be beneficial to minute what's just been said regarding late applications? Because it's not just DGHP and it's not just the one we had at the last meeting. It seems to happen quite frequently, and how we advertise that sort of thing, I'm not quite sure, but it needs to be brought to the public's attention.
Well, I mean, I saw the Standard last week where your comments were quoted therein, and that's probably as good a public announcement as you can actually get for the general public. You will always have a number of people who choose to, through either their own views or the fact that they're just unaware that permission is required, that they proceed to do things. The first port of call isn't jumping in with enforcement action, it is to seek a retrospective application, but we always make it clear that any unauthorised works are undertaken entirely at applicant's own risk and may result in enforcement action. And as I say, DGHP are discovering that right now, that we're not going to be in a position to approve all the ones they've done.
Councillor Maitland.
Yeah, could I just ask, I've been looking at these and thinking idly, do we get a planning fee for each of these in the normal course events? We do. Right, thank you.
Councillor Courtry.
Yeah, just an easier source of heat pumps. I mean, they're usually dealt by through delegation. But, I mean, I had one in New Abbey where a neighbouring householder, because it was a common access, actually got in touch with me. It was only like 3 foot off the ground, which meant if a kid came running along, they could knock their head in it, plus the fact they could stick their fingers through the grill and hit the fans. So I wonder if we've got any restrictions on what height these fans are placed at, because certainly if they're below a certain level, they're too easily accessed by young kids who can't get their fingers through the grill into where the fans are whirring away. So do we have regulations on them?
There's no planning restrictions on the height, but the one which does cause us concern is particularly with flatted properties, where if you've got a 3-storey block of flats, all the air-sourced heat pumps go at ground floor level, and therefore the ones at the top floor and the middle floor will be served by an air-source heat pump at the bottom, so you've got a collection of 3 of these around the ground floor flat's bedroom window, which really isn't very clever. So it's those particular ones that we're seeking either relocation or amendment to.
Okay, we can put a note in the minute with Councillor McKee's thoughts, or the committee's thoughts. Can you do that, Paul?
I may have to tidy up the wording. My understanding is the committee would like it noted that it is disappointed to see that it's still receiving late applications for works and would encourage applicants to apply to the planning department before undertaking any works. Is that fair?
Councillor Witts.
For the benefit of accuracy, Chairman, should it not, the term not be retrospective application, because a late application could be, oh, I'm 24 hours late, but retrospective is claiming the work has already been done. Sorry to be pedantic. Point noted. Certainly people would pick up on.
That's quite correct. For a planning application, the technical term is it's a retrospective application. For a listed building consent, it's a late listed building consent, because you can always apply at any stage for that.
Thank you. Committee, I have no further business for today.